welcome back to this special edition of Community Showcase right here on ITV. It's the month of Ramadan, and later on this evening, just after the Taraweeh Salah, we will be having a special pledge for the Ikhlaas Academia Library and Resource Centre based in Cape Town. Still in the studio, Dr. Ikhlaas Parker and Mahmoud Sangle here to talk to us about that library. And during the break, you mentioned something very interesting that happened to a youth that visited the library, Doctor?
Well, the core function of the library is to house books and to disseminate the knowledge through the books, but you also conduct a number of activities, one such activity is, we, for example, have Quran stories that we not just read to the children, but we actually enact them, with props and so forth. So one such Saturday, we were dealing with Nabi Yunus, and the Saturday after that, Nabi Yusuf. And during this course, of these 2 Saturdays, there were about 70 odd children, a lot of them from the townships, and in and amongst them were 2 non-Muslim kids. They just slipped into the bus, and Sheikh Yasin Katona felt, look, they're there, so let's take them along. And then, alhamdulillah, one of the 2 boys was so intrigued, by the lessons and the message, that emanated out of the stories of Nabi Yunus. He went home, and a week later came back with his mother and father with the grand, very graceful news that this 8-year-old wanted to embrace Islam, and he took Shahada right there in the library. And this is a type of fulfillment that by being involved in this library and the diverse facility that the library provides, this is a type of fulfillment that our community can benefit by. So yes, alhamdulillah, books, yes, we've got space, for over 50,000 books. And today we're standing maybe close on to 6,500 to 7,000 books, so a long way to go. What we are saying is that here's an opportunity, it is clearly believed that what is going to get us into Jannah, yes, it's important, imperative for us to perform our salahs, roza, zakah, etc. But the thing that's going to get us into Jannah is Allah Ta'ala's mercies and our good deeds. What we're saying is, here's an opportunity for you to embrace a good deed, to invest in a book or a collection of books. Make sure that we grow that 6,500 titles to maybe 10 to 15,000 titles within the foreseeable next year. And alhamdulillah, very soon we would want to reach capacity of 50,000 titles. But for now, we're looking at between 5 and 10,000 books. And here's an opportunity for you to invest, to step forward, get involved in a good deed as a sadaqul jariyah for many, many a year to come. And we've got, for example, the occasion of the Book Legacy Project, where if you buy a book or a number of books, you can then accredit the recognition and the acknowledgement of that book to a loved one, to a parent, to anyone, that's been close to you. And that would be in perpetuity. So gracefully, the use of that book, the imparting of knowledge from that book that will empower a Muslim, that will change the life of a Muslim, that will bring a person closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the reward of that would naturally go to the person whose name appears on that legacy certificate that's going to be inserted into the book. So what we are saying, utilize this opportunity. This library is a community project. It is therefore the opportunity for our people, the ummah, to step forward, use this opportunity to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by indulging in this good deed. Mahmoud will talk to us about the type of books that we require, and literally the sky is the limit. This library is a project that is going to be standing there hopefully long after all of us have passed this dunya, and therefore all the more important for us to make sure that we provide the type of resources within it that will take us forward as a Muslim ummah, inshallah.
Obviously, with the rollout of the content and the books in the library, you're not finishing one section to say just history is covered here. There's some books on jurisprudence, some other kind of books for kids and so on. How are you going to roll that out, and what are the specific ranges and titles that you're looking at, not only as individual books, but also as the collections that we've seen that you hold in the library?
This is a mammoth task, Samit. If you look at the way libraries develop these days, there's almost a specialized section in each library, whether it's a community library or a public library or a university library. Once they professionalize the institution, there's a dedicated space and a position for somebody to actually do collections and acquisitions, for somebody to do procurement. And the moment a person is put in that position, that person has to have knowledge of what that area of specialization is really all about. And in this case, we're talking about the specialist section of Islamic literature, knowledge on Islam, and therefore literature on Islam. In South Africa, we have dealt with a number of university libraries and public libraries, and because there isn't really an institution in South Africa called a specialized Islamic library other than the Ikhlaas Academia Library, we're kind of pioneering this space in this country at this moment. So the question you're asking is one where we rely on our own pioneering initiative in order to develop the knowledge of how we acquire and produce the material that is in demand for people in these three audiences that I explained earlier. So to come specifically to how this knowledge is accessed, procured and presented to our audiences, one has to look at where knowledge was produced historically. And historically, if you go back to the early years of Islam, the great institutions of Baghdad and Al-Qahira is where the great scholars of Islam have done their work, they've done their research, and through those methods of writing on the parchments of the time and the early books of the time, which are now preserved in the libraries of the world, where these books and these works have survived. They've survived wars, they've survived invasions, and as late as about 10 years ago, when Iraq was invaded by the Americans, many institutions, libraries and museums were destroyed.
Yes.
And that's part of our heritage. So we're living in an age where we still have threats to knowledge, threats to knowledge production and knowledge dissemination. And unfortunately, because history has not smiled on us, we are in a space now where we need to look at the way knowledge is produced in the Western world. And I'm talking about institutions like Oxford University, for example, Leiden University, the E.J. Brill publishers. So there's both publishers and academic institutions where they produce great works. And some of these works are actually authenticated and vetted and verified by Muslim scholars. So there's Muslim scholarship happening in the Western world as well. And that is where we need to source these works from. So many of our individual publications, as well as the collections that we are sourcing, are from that part of the world, and they don't come cheap. And there's two challenges in this respect. The one is that to produce a book these days costs money. So there's a great deal of investment already in publishing a book. But there's secondly also a great deal of investment in order to challenge the actual capitalism that is overtaking knowledge production, because there are companies, there's an industry of selling information, and part of selling that information is selling knowledge on Islam, and therefore we need now to acquire and access those works in order for us to be able to afford it to give to the audience that we serve as Academia Islamic Library.
The goal this evening is to get the library stock up to 20% of capacity, which is 10,000. So we're about 4,500 books short to get to that target. Roughly looking at a price of 500 to 700 Rand per book, we can safely say that the target for this evening that you guys have set and want to set would be in the region of just over 2 million Rand that's required to make sure that you can increase your capacity, increase the scope of the books in the library, and also make sure that there are books that cater for different sectors of society's needs when it comes to them looking for information in your facility. Doctor?
If one really looks at it, and it's actually a beautiful scenario we're looking at, because a book can cost up to 500 Rand, and some maybe even slightly less. It can cost thousands, and then a collection of books could cost tens of thousands of Rand. So what we're saying is, here's an opportunity for you to pick in exactly where you want to be, where you're comfortable in. We would obviously coerce and encourage people to utilize this opportunity to populate the shelves of the library, to actually make sure that we raise 2.5 million Rand tonight, so that we can acquire the 2.5 to 3,000, 4 to 5,000 books. In fact, by embracing the opportunity, buy one book if you can. But the ideal situation scenario for us is for people to step forward and say, I would want to be in position of 10 or 15 or 20 pledge certificates that I would put into books, in recognition and honor of my great-grandparents, my grandparents, my parents, and yes, even people that we revere in our life that might not be having been related to us. And at 500 Rand, you could so easily, for 5,000 Rand, sponsor 10 books. Now, the scenario to look at is this. What is the impact of those 10 books being on the shelf? What is the impact on your well-being and the gratification that you want to bring in acknowledgement to your loved ones, to your parents? It's a fact that hopefully for the next 50 years, multitudes of people are going to be acquiring knowledge out of this book that's going to bring them closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think that is our ultimate objective on this dunya, is to get close to our Creator. What we are saying, in your personal endeavor, we do all the things we said earlier. What's going to bring us into Jannah is Allah Ta'ala's mercies as well as our good deeds. And here you have a multitude of opportunities through placement of that certificate, in the book, where every user is going to usher us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's going to usher us towards that great deed that we all are aspiring for. So yes, there are, for example, sets, collections, and alhamdulillah, the Muslim community of South Africa is a very privileged and a very honored one, in that we have people that, to my mind, is one of the more generous communities on this dunya. And we are asking those people to put your hands in your pockets, make sure that you fulfill the requirement of this public institution by forwarding the necessary funding required, so that we can acquire the collections of books, so that we can move beyond that requirement of 20% collecting space, because we need to buy at least 5,000 books. Sami, there's another question. The longer we delay acquiring these books, the more it's going to cost the year after and the year after. So we are saying, let's capitalize, let's maximize our efforts and make sure that we buy as many books as possible, because it's going to become even more expensive. And I think that is our appeal tonight. We most certainly want to fulfill the objectives of this library, but we need our community to support us. We need our community to make sure that they become part of this historical legacy, to leave a Sadaqul Jariyah for our community and our children of tomorrow, inshallah.
On that note, Dr. Ikhlaas Parker, the chairperson of the Al-Ikhlaas Academia Library and Resource Center, and Mahmoud Sanga, a friend of the library and consultant to the library. Shukran for joining us in studio. You guys will be back within a couple of hours to make sure that you coerce and invite people to join by donating towards this cause of filling and stocking up the shelves of the Academia Library. An important opportunity for you to take heed of this evening exists just after Taraweeh, as you have an opportunity to donate and make sure that you can also be part of stocking up the Academia Library and Resource Center in Cape Town, as they want to reach their target of getting their shelves at least 20% full of the 50,000 book capacity that they hold. From myself, Samit Moos, until we speak next time, Assalamu alaikum and good evening.